Hello, everyone. This is Robert Aldana. Welcome to another Sunday Conversation. And I'm going to tell you something. These conversations continue to be incredible with some of the people that we have joining us lately in this series as we raise awareness for child abuse prevention, which is the month of April. And we have with us a local law enforcement officer, Patrick Ahrens, who is also a school resource officer. How are you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today.
Should I call you officer? Should I call you Mr. Ahrens? How would you like me to address you? Because you are.
You know, you're welcome to call him by my first name, Patrick. Officer Ahrens works.
Okay, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Officer Ahrens. And of course, we have with us the co-host here with the Children's Network. How you doing, Stephanie Barron Lu?
So great to be here. Thank you so much, Robert, for having us.
Absolutely. So we got some great questions we're going to be talking about, or just asking and talking about and following up. You know, Officer Ahrens, you see a lot of things in your career. And as we focus today on the child abuse prevention and how important it is, we've talked about this many times on a few different series of this, how important it is to recognize that many times spousal abuse leads directly or indirectly to child abuse, right?
Right.
Tell us your role. What are some of the things that you are called upon when it comes to situations like that?
You know, as a law enforcement officer, we do respond quite frequently to calls regarding spousal abuse, calls regarding possible child neglect, physical abuse of children. Those are definitely some of the hardest calls to investigate, especially myself having children. But, you know, it's definitely one of the reasons why I got into law enforcement, to be a champion for those that, you know, are abused and help bring them justice. So a lot of what we do on those calls, you know, we don't necessarily, just because we show up to a call doesn't mean we're taking action. A lot of what we do is just we're taking investigatory steps to see exactly what's going on, look at the totality of the circumstances, conducting interviews, you know, visualizing the environment. What environment is the child living in? Is there possible violence going on in the household and stuff like that?
And so when, you know, just speaking for myself, when I think of my own history of being a child that calls the police, right? And is like, I need help, I need safety, right? And having a police officer being able to hand my parents, here's actually a parenting resource, right? It's that knowledge that, like you mentioned, it's not always this action of removal of children, removal from a situation. Sometimes it's, you know, how are we helping to see what's going on behind that surface, what's going on behind these behaviors, right? And parenting from a place of urgency, you know, parenting from a place of not enough resources is so prevalent in our society as a whole. And so what, as a school resource officer or as a police officer in law enforcement, you know, what can you share as far as the way that you're coming into these situations? Like, you know, what are some of the tools that you're hopeful that families can really have access to?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and like I said, when we respond out to these calls, we're not always going to be taking action. Our initial response is to determine exactly what is occurring. But, you know, a lot of these times we can just be a resource for the parents and put them, you know, in touch with other resources, like you said, that could help them, you know, in terms of managing their situation at home, putting them in touch with the resources, family therapy, to provide them with the assistance that they need to get them moving in the right direction. I think there can be a negative connotation with police showing up at your house. A lot of times, you know, when the police shows up, it's during one of your times of, you know, emergency, when you're having a very negative experience. But I think a lot of times we look at it as trying to have a positive impact on the family. And, you know, if we can urge that family in the right direction and provide them with the resources they need, then, you know, that's the best outcome. You know, we're not always, just because we show up to a potential child abuse case, rarely do we actually have to remove the child. You know, obviously we're going to do an investigation, and if there's an imminent danger to the child's welfare, then obviously we'll need to remove the child. But I think that's rarely the case. A lot of the times we can be a resource and an advocate for those families and steer them in the right direction and provide them with the resources they need.
And it sounds like a strong referral arm, really, that, you know, really looking at from mandated reporting to community supporting, right? Like that's something that we're hopeful for, you know, building a hopeful future together and having, having the vulnerability of knowing that, yes, you're seeing us in our darkest times, and removal of some of that shame that, you're also a person, you're also a father, right? You're also part of our community. Would you like to speak more to that?
Yeah. I think a lot of times when we respond out to calls, a lot of people just see a uniform and a badge, and it can be intimidating. But what many people don't realize is we're human beings too. There's a face, there's a person behind this badge. We have feelings, we're human beings as well. And, you have your bad apples in every career, and law enforcement is no different. But I think a majority of cops are out there to do good. I didn't get into this line of work to, take people to jail. Yes, I enjoy keeping my community safe, but the reason I joined law enforcement was to be a resource to our community and help families in need. It's one of the main reasons I got into law enforcement. And yes, there can be a negative connotation with law enforcement showing up at your door, but it's my goal to kind of remove that stigmatism and show that we can respond and help as well.
Reminds me a lot of with parenting, right? No parent wakes up and says how am I going to make my child's life miserable today? And similarly, children are not giving us the hard time. They're having a hard time, right? And, by the time that you arrive on the scene, there's probably a series of discouragement that's really happening, which is something that, positive discipline as a program, we're not just in our general school communities, but we're also supporting our juvenile justice and our trauma exposed communities, and our, it's just so important that parenting is also just, it's relationships, right? It's respectful communication, it's problem solving, it's solutions oriented thinking, and being able to know that mistakes are opportunities to learn.
Yeah. And I am no stranger to how difficult parenting can be. I have a 2-year-old myself. I got another one on the way, and it adds so much stress to your life. Parenting is no joke. It adds just an insane amount of stress on the relationship. It's no easy task. So
when you start adding in some of those societal factors of being housing insecure or food insecure, or and
even the social pressures. I mean, I think our kids today, when I was a kid, I'm going to be 60 years old. When I was a kid, I mean, we used to drink from the water hose outside, and we used to play outside in the cement, play baseball and football. And if we had a problem, we'd talk to somebody, and us two were the only people who knew about it. All the social media pressures that come today. Kids today have it a lot tougher, and there is no mistake about it. The kids of today have it a lot tougher than we ever had it as kids. I'm talking about my generation. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. I agree with that big time. And I think that we're also, when I think of myself as a parent, I'm a first generation college student. I myself am Mexican, Guatemalan, and Chinese in heritage. And when I think of the cycles of harm, the cycles of, violence, the cycles that, that are perpetuated through some parenting practices, they leave an imprint. And there's also a lot of love. There's also a lot of strength that our families carry. And so really it's that, in our program, we say connection before correction. And so if in your upbringing, you were faced with correction first, and then later on after the trauma and the crying and then you're connecting, that's where you're protecting that relationship. And so now if you're able to access resources and you're able to do that most uncomfortable, vulnerable thing and say, I need help, right? And open yourself to that, then you're able to connect before ever having to correct. And that's prevention, right? That's what we want. And so when you're sharing what teens especially are going through right now, growing up as a teenager, and you're thinking of, the risky behaviors and, the low self-esteem, I know that I'm parenting for the long term. I'm not just parenting to stop a behavior right now because it's inconvenient, but I'm parenting thinking that I don't want to be crossing my fingers and on bended knee praying that my child isn't joining a gang, but I want to know that I've instilled in them the belief that they are worthy of respect, that they can be compassionate, that they are able to find belonging and significance in safe, positive ways, as opposed to seeking that externally. And so 100%, I really appreciate just the humanizing perspective of you are also a dad. And it's something that's really kind of humbling, right? Where it's oh my gosh, how privileged am I? And I'm having a hard time, right? It brings that extra layer of hopefully demystifying for all of our community that are watching these things, that we get it, right? we get it, and it's hard. And oftentimes when you're coming to a service, it's at your lowest point,
Sure.
you know? And so child abuse prevention is that deep breath, those 2 or 3 seconds before you're reacting, before you're responding, and taking a moment to just like come back into your body instead of that visceral reaction. And that's something that I hope also comes when you're mentioning that badge, right? When you're mentioning, you know, the negative connotations that can come from law enforcement is, you know, taking that moment and recognize, what is my body feeling? And how can I invite myself to see you as a resource? How can I invite myself to really humanize, whether that's our teenager that's giving us the hard time, or an educator or a service provider that we feel we're not, you know, connecting with. And I think that that's really how we're building a brighter and better future together, than just bringing that humanity in.
Indeed. Thank you. That's very well stated. Very well said. Officer Ahrens, what advice or insight can you share to a parent who has made that phone call and feels ashamed for having made that phone call? Because there's a stigma, you know, the neighbors saw, I better not say anything because, you know, what, you know, he could lose his job or she could lose her job, whatever the case is, or just the whole shame process, because there's a certain amount, you know, the victims carry a lot of shame of spousal abuse. Like, it was my fault. It must have been something that I did. What advice can you give to someone who is experiencing spousal, domestic, or seeing child abuse in the home?
Yeah, you know, with situations like that, you're absolutely right that there is this stigma that, you know, there's this giant shame, you know, associated with the victim. And it's just, if you weren't a good parent, you wouldn't be making that call to law enforcement, right? It's the good parents that care about their children that are willing to go out of their way and make that phone call and say, I'm struggling right now and I need help. I need services. So, you know, there shouldn't be any shame in that phone call whatsoever. And, you know, as I said earlier, we never just go out, and we're not robots. We're not just going to go out and just remove the child, right? We're going to take all our investigatory steps. We're going to speak with the parents, see what's going on, observe the living conditions. And, you know, it's really rare that we actually do ever remove the child from the living space. Most of the time we can just get them in touch with services, you know, whether it's family therapy, victim advocate services that can, you know, help put them on the right track. But there really should never be any shame associated with, you know, victims of spousal abuse, you know, or if anything's going on with, you know, child neglect or anything like that.
As a resource officer, I have to imagine that you are available in case there's a student who's having a problem at home, who can come to you and say, hey, Officer Ahrens, I'm struggling with something. And many times a student may come to you and say, I don't want you to say anything right now. I just want some advice, right? You must get that on occasion.
More often, you know, it's actually a rather frequent conversation I've had where, you know, this is going to be my 3rd year as a school resource officer. And I've had lots of interactions with parents where they have my work cell and they call me up and they just say, I don't know what's going on right now. You know, my child is just, he's not wanting to get up for school. I can't get him out of bed. He's not doing his homework. I'm a single parent. I need help. And it's those parents that know I'm not going to come out there and judge them. I understand how difficult it is being a single parent, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help that parent during this trying time when their child is going through high school and struggling. And like you guys said earlier, I mean, being a kid these days is not the same. Even for me growing up in the 90s, you know, I didn't have a cell phone. There wasn't Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Today it's all around you. It's pervasive. It's in your face. When I went home from school, we had a break from it. Now it's just, you go home from school, you check your phone, and it's social media all day, what people are saying, what people are doing. And you have, you know, the vape, and it's such a detrimental effect on their brains. So,
and, you know, something that we haven't talked about is bullying, right?
Yeah.
When we're thinking of child abuse prevention, that, you know, bullying, whether that's bullying as a parent to a child or a trusted caregiver or adult to a child, you know, do you have any insights that you can share for families that are maybe facing that their child is being bullied and it's something that's following them through their grades or, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, always the first step is getting in contact with the school, but as a school resource officer myself, the school always will involve me. I've held bullying seminars. I have a PowerPoint that I've made regarding bullying behavior and how to mitigate it. So, I'll sit down with these potential students that are getting bullied and the students that are doing the bullying, and do my best to counsel them on that behavior and prevent it from going forward.
A little bit of like restorative practice, right? Where
Absolutely.
You're not saying that it's a victim and a bully or a victim and a perpetrator, but that it's two kids.
And oftentimes the children who's doing the bullying has something going on at home, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a cry for help as well. So they need assistance as well. But yeah, it's just going back to what you said, Robert. It's these parents that reach out for help for their kids. I can tell that they sometimes feel shame about it, but they never should. And
they shouldn't.
I'm there to help. And parenting is not easy. And I'll go out to their house and I'll sit down with their child and I'll talk with them. I'll refer them to counseling services, and I think it really helps put them in a positive direction.
And I would have to imagine that if a child at the school had a problem, they can come to you also.
100%. My doors are always open, and it frequently happens, almost once a day. One of the students come and will talk to me and say, "Hey, I got this going on in my life."
Mm-hmm. Are there anything that you would like to share with maybe other officers or other service providers, or anything that you have found as a best practice to help to kind of level set of, the problem is here and let's stand, shoulder to shoulder with each other and be here together in relationship? Is there anything like that?
I think just, as a police officer, just having that human approach to situations like this and understand that you're not always there to just go out, what's the problem, and try and solve the problem. Go out and try and understand that everyone here is human and everyone has their own problems and struggles, just like we as police officers have our own struggles and problems in our personal life. And, if you can understand that and treat everyone like a human and, provide those resources and help if you can, as opposed to taking, enforcement action, then a lot of times that'll lead to the most positive outcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Officer Ahrens, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for your caring about not just your community, but the parents and the kids and everything. It makes a world of difference. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, what can I say? Thank you so much. Co-host of the Children's Network. You've been amazing. I look forward to doing many more of these with you. Anything Absolutely. You want to close with, or are we good?
I'd like to say that I think with child abuse and spousal abuse, there is a lot of barriers to reporting. A lot of times it's just they're ignorant of the reporting procedures, or they think that they're going to get in trouble. And I want to put it out there that you can always contact our police department if you're a victim of spousal abuse, or if you think there's a situation where there's child neglect. And that doesn't mean we're going to come out and we're going to remove the child. It means we're going to do everything in our power to protect that child and protect that potential victim of spousal abuse. So you can contact our department anytime. You don't have to dial 911. You can call our non-emergent line and a dispatcher will pick up, and you can report, whatever you want to.
And maybe, demystifying that you can, start making a case anonymously, right?
Absolutely.
Is there any other tips that you can, share if there is someone out there that is not yet ready to leave their abuser, but, any best practices to keep them and their children safe?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You can contact this department as an anonymous reporting party, but that's going to be the first step. And like I said, zero shame, contact us. Don't assume that we're going to come out and take enforcement action. If we can steer you in the right direction and get you in touch with resources, that's going to happen as well. So,
that's interesting that you say that, because, a light bulb just went off in my head here. And that is what you just said is, we're not going to come here and take the child, or we're not going to come here and remove. People will not call. Absolutely. Because they don't want the child to be removed.
Absolutely.
They have no idea what's going to happen to that child.
100%.
Right.
And that's a concern, is that, well, if I call and, this is not a big a deal as I thought, but the police come out and take the kid, well, I'm going to live with that. And that's not how it works.
Okay. Excellent.
You're in the business of protecting that family unit and doing whatever you can to
exactly
lift up the needs as opposed to shaming the family.
100%.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Officer Patrick Ahrens. Thank you once again. I know I said thank you a couple minutes ago, but I can't thank you enough.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert. It's such a joy and a pleasure to do these important destigmatizing conversations, really demystify what child abuse is and what seeking help could look like.
Yeah. And if we can help even just one family with doing these programs, I mean, it's worth it. You know, it's absolutely, it's worth it. It's worth it. So thank you both.
Thank you.
I want to thank you. Speaking of thanking, I'm thanking everyone here, but I'm going to thank you for watching this program. And I'm going to thank you in advance. You know why? Because I'm going to ask that you share these videos and you share these resources with people that you know. You probably know somebody that's a victim of spousal, domestic abuse, child abuse, or you can even be that person. And just know that there are resources and places that'll help you. You are not alone. You have a tremendous amount of powerful allies that are here to help you stay safe. Be safe and stay safe. I want to thank you all for watching. Look forward to chatting with you soon. If you have any comments or questions, please post them here underneath this video. Look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye. All right, everyone, we have another great community leader and speaker. Super proud and pleased to present to you today Faris Sabah, who is the Santa Cruz County Superintendent of Schools. Faris, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. And of course, Stephanie, how are you so far? You holding up?
Great. Oh, grateful to be your co-host in these powerful and impactful conversations.
Yeah, these are great ones, right? I mean, we got some great people like as yourself, and we've been able to really share a lot of incredible intel to the community. So as you know, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And we're going to just kind of get right to it. And I'm going to ask you, what would you like families, first of all, to know about how our schools, all the schools in our county, play a part in the prevention of child abuse?
Well, I think it's parents know that schools really represent the second home for a child. They spend maybe up to 8 hours there. And safety, the concept of safety in our schools is something that we really are focusing on, and it's something that's really gotten more broad in our definition of safety. So when I think about preventing abuse for children, and I think about how we're keeping students safe, I think that schools have to play and continue to play an extremely important role in that. And one way is that we try to understand the different kinds of abuse that exist, whether it's physical or emotional, or it's neglect or sexual abuse. I think that we have a responsibility as educators and as people who work with children that if we are aware of any possibility, if we have any suspicion that there is abuse, we are required by law to report that immediately. Yes. And that's one important piece of the role of the educational folks. I think in addition to that, we are able to work with students in the classroom to help them build awareness about different ways that they may be unsafe, or the different signs that maybe they're in a situation that could lead to abuse. In addition, I believe that we believe in an empowerment model. We believe that we want to help our children and our youth have the skills and the abilities to be able to get help if they're in a situation that they feel uncomfortable with, or if they are in fact experiencing abuse at the hands of somebody. In addition, we have a lot of partnerships with our parents. We work with great organizations like Positive Discipline and many other organizations where we work with parents and we try to destigmatize the idea of abuse, and also bring awareness to that it is a reality that exists in our community, that we need to be very vigilant and protective of our children, that we need to constantly be thinking about protective factors to support our children and our youth, and to know how to seek out help if we are at all concerned about the safety of a child.
You know, it's a great point, because the destigmatizing is incredibly important. Our kids, as us as adults, there is a certain amount of embarrassment or shame when it comes to, I need to talk to somebody, or gosh, I just need some help, or I need some, or, something's going on at home and I don't know who to talk to. I'm embarrassed. How do you go from that feeling towards empowering our students? And we'll talk about the parents in a minute, but how do you go from that feeling to empowering our students to say, hey, it's okay to come talk to somebody at school to maybe get a little bit of assistance or some guidance?
I think that that an important aspect of this is that when a child is a victim or a survivor of abuse, that they don't carry with them the guilt and that self-blame that they're responsible for that abuse. And I think an important part of one is by having awareness that this is happening in our society more than many people are able to talk about. We hear much more about things like gun violence and other kinds of hazards and risks that are out there, and we don't like to talk about these certain kinds of things, and that creates this idea of secrecy that if it's happening to me, I don't want to talk about it. If it happened to my child, I don't want to talk about it with anybody else. And I think we need to break that if we remember that by talking about it, we're going to make the situation better for that child. Right. And I think as long as we hear that message that it is in the best interest of that child to be able to intervene if a situation is happening where they're being abused and getting help for them, making sure they're getting behavioral health services, to be able to work through their challenges, that the family can get support services. There's so many agencies that are ready to step up and help families and to help children as long as we speak up. And I think that knowing that we are not to blame for that as survivors, that as a family member, it doesn't mean I'm a bad parent if something happened to my child, but I do have a responsibility to do everything I can to make sure that they're safe and that they're getting the help that they deserve. Yep. I'll speak out of my experience. I am a survivor of abuse, and in one of the things that was very challenging for me, my parents did believe me when I spoke to them, but we never talked about it after that. It became something that we never, and that in itself created a charge for it because I thought that maybe I had done something wrong. And so as a community leader, I think we need to tell our stories as well, because I think people need to know that this is something real that happens to a lot of people in our community, a lot more than should, and that we need to speak up and that we need to break through, make sure that people know that it is important for us to speak up, that there are resources to help us, that we need to do everything we can to protect our children.
I so appreciate you sharing and being so open and vulnerable, as that's what we need from our community leaders. And we're leaders at home. In order to be that effective parent, it's being able to model, I need help, or, this is beyond me, and I trust that there is someone that can help us. And it's that patchwork that you mentioned of, we are, not in a resource desert. We have a ton of incredible agencies and partners that want to support. And it's really up to us to shore up the courage and the vulnerability to say, you know what, I am not bad. Something bad has happened, right? And really, it's not villainizing, any particular caregiver, but really asserting those boundaries that we're able to have safe classrooms, right? Understanding, good touch, bad touch, and, like something on the shoulder versus, something else, and being able to understand and advocate for our voice to keep our little ones safe as much as our youth, and have, teen dating violence addressed, and, LGBTQ inclusive spaces, and really, how do you see the COE as a part of that, building that resiliency together, building that muscle as a community?
I really appreciate the way you describe that and the interconnectedness of creating a sense of belonging in schools, as well as having very clear, explicit understandings of where my boundaries are and the right that I have as a child to be able to tell an adult that this is my space, or that I feel uncomfortable, and also to be able to go to another adult and get help. And I think that one of the things that has happened more so in the last few years is that we recognize that schools are not only about education, they're also about creating wellness. And there's a lot more resources in our schools. There's a lot more therapeutic support in our schools. There's a lot more training. Our schools are investing in partnership with community-based organizations and county behavioral health in peer-to-peer support groups. And we've doubled or even tripled the numbers of people who can provide therapeutic support. And I believe that the awareness and the need to be able to make sure that our students are safe, whether it's students who are working through their identities, students who are LGBTQ, students who are experiencing bullying, maybe experiencing anxiety, suicidal ideation, and of course, students who are who are victims or survivors of abuse. In all of those situations, we want to make sure that they have the knowledge and the support they need to be able to do whatever they need to do to get the help that they need and also to be safe.
That's great to hear because, as we said before we went on the air, next to our home, our schools are considered like the next safest place. Mm-hmm. And, and it's important that people like yourself speak up and say, hey, I was a victim of abuse as a kid. And me, Robert Aldana, was a victim of a lot of emotional abuse as a kid. And, there are times when, as a child, you're either going to go one way with it or go another way with it in terms of like, how are you going to react to it? And having resources are incredibly important. And the reaching out to our kids in our schools is monumental.
And it's really, taking that problem off your back and looking together shoulder to shoulder with your school counselor, your county office of education, your school principal, your educator, your teacher, and saying like, how can we approach this together? Because this is heavy and you don't have to hold it alone. Right?
Absolutely.
When I think about the stigma that exists, when we were working on increasing behavioral health services as a result of the mental health crisis that our youth are experiencing, we found that the stigma related to mental health really was more coming from parents, not all parents, but some, and not from the young people. The young people felt very comfortable walking into a wellness center or talking to their therapist, getting that kind of help. In many cases, parents were the ones that didn't understand why my child needed this or what it meant or if it meant it reflected something on them. Mm-hmm. And so some of this work really is helping parents recognize the ways that we can help our children be safe and get support. And I think that by communicating to families as much as possible the power of having somebody, a trained professional who's working with my child or with my family, and really destigmatizing that is something that is really positive. And one of the messages that we constantly are trying to get out to our families that working together, getting help, that mental health support, especially after having a traumatic experience, is so important and necessary, and they need to be a part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. They need to increase their awareness and help us to continue to support their children and help them, with their well-being.
With April being Child Abuse Prevention Month, it's very comforting to know that there's a constant, there's a constant effort to reach out to our kids and let them know that these things are available. Now, what about parents?
Well, like I said earlier, many organizations are doing amazing work with our parent community, and I think in the same way that parents and families recognize the schools are really important as part of the school community, we value and just celebrate our families so much. We recognize that they are so important, not just to our children, of course, but to our whole community. And so building those partnerships, building those positive relationships where we're listening to our parents, where we're making informed decisions, understanding the needs of our families is really important. I think parents need to recognize that it is their voice that needs to be heard in our schools and that we need to be listening to them and honoring them as much as possible. And that means creating safe spaces for our parents where their languages are represented, where they're seeing people that look like them, where they are able to where they know that they will get the respect and responsiveness that they deserve. That's one aspect of this that's really important. And I think that creating those partnerships where families are coming to our schools, where we're reaching out to families, where they can see the interconnection between their school system and that we share the same values that they have, that we want the best for their children, and that we have great resources to provide to support them with, I think, and that we're going to honor their voice in decision making. I think all of that leads to creating a community that will facilitate more difficult conversations, like we'd like to be able to provide your child with some social emotional wellness or mental health services, and working together in partnership and kind of surrounding that child with love and support.
And I love that you touched on the voice part, right? And having that representation that really matters. And I know that the COE and your leadership specifically has done a number of initiatives to really source up that kind of leadership from the youth engagement perspective as well as the family engagement perspective. You know, whether it's parent site councils or serving on the board of or on the board for the county office, or having now a youth liaison there, right? That isn't just there, but also has, voting power. Can you speak a little bit to how, families, teens, youth can find ways to engage or, be a part of that positive change?
You point out some of the exciting initiatives that we've been able to work on in partnership with different agencies and the school districts. One of those is we partnered with Monarch Services to create a mental health council, leadership council of students. And those students are helping to provide feedback specifically about how to destigmatize mental health services at schools, and also to provide feedback about how to build wellness centers at the high schools, which is a project we're working on with our school districts. We're hoping to get to every high school in the county and having a wellness center. It's important for us to come from a place of humility, to recognize that we don't have all the answers, that only in partnership and listening to the voices of our students and our youth, of our families and our communities, that is the only way we can make informed decisions. And in that humility and that partnership, we're able to create solutions that are representative of our community. And we're able to also be nimble enough to move resources so that when the needs of our youth and our children change and of our families change, that we are able to adapt. Our school system is now going into a time of reduced resources, and we're expecting less funding coming to schools over the next few years. And when that happens, we have to prioritize our services, make sure that we don't cut the most important pieces. And things like preventing child abuse, making sure that our behavioral health services, making sure that our parent and family engagements are still in place is going to be more important than ever. And so it's important for us to stay true to our values, to work with our community, and to make sure that we're uplifting those voices and using them as guides for what is most important for our schools. And I can't think of anything more important than keeping our students safe and staying connected and engaged with our families.
Something that I really appreciate is that as a state of California, we've talked about how we're moving from mandated reporting to community supporting. And you mentioned, the stigma is oftentimes coming from parents or caregivers, as it's really shifting that paradigm of, why is my child airing our dirty laundry, right? Or you're seeking support. Now the finger is pointed at me. It's always the mother, or it's always the this, right? And so, I appreciate that, you bring that parents are the strength of the community, right? Like we're uplifting our homes so that we can feed into that positive school culture and really mirror in those values, as no one wakes up and says, how am I going to make, that family's life difficult today, right? I mean, as educators and as counselors and as leaders in our community, we're really charged with this hope that we're building a resilient future together for today and for tomorrow, right? And so is there anything that you would like to share as a message to families or parents that are struggling as their children are accessing, different services, whether it's, special needs or it's food insecurity or, counseling services or, speech development or, any of those services that oftentimes can serve as a bridge to really supporting the family, but might not feel like it when you're in that uncomfortable, messy place?
I think that it's important for our schools to be continuing the work to becoming community schools. Mm-hmm. There is a grant that provides funding for some school districts, but in general, when I hear you mention that families who are struggling with food, there's absolutely no reason for our families to live in hunger in Santa Cruz County when we have amazing organizations like Second Harvest Food Bank, for example, being able to provide those services. And so in many cases, I think that it's important for us as providers and as the school system to make sure our schools are representative of our families and that they're safe spaces for them to come, that they don't have to worry about their immigration status, they don't have to worry if they speak English or not, that we have the ability to connect and listen, learn, and support them. and that families feel comfortable that we are partners in serving them and their children, and that we want to be there to serve, and that we want to make sure that we are removing the obstacles that could get in the way of a child accessing these many available resources that we have, and the obstacles that could get in the way for them to being successful in school and beyond. And so this partnership, I think, is something we want to continue to grow. We're concerned also because students are not coming to school in as high numbers as they have done in the past. Chronic absenteeism is at record highs. And so we want to make sure that we are doing everything so that we are partnering together with our families to bring our homes and our schools as close together as possible so that we can create that safety net for our children.
I know a big part for us at Positive Discipline that we hear from families is, the bribes and the punishments have to get more and more creative, right? Some families are like, okay, that's it. If you don't, get out of bed, like no more iPad or no more computer or no more this, right? And so, our hope in really being able to partner with, partners such as the COE, such as, at the PVSD Wellness Center, Santa Cruz City School District, and really figuring out, what are some of those best practices so that we're able to move from the bribes and the rewards and the punishment to really looking at how are we supporting our kids with the social and life skills that they need to be successful, whether that looks like time management, whether that looks like family meetings to co-create respectful routines together, and really, setting that expectation that as a family, what do we value and how does that feed into us feeling successful in getting out of bed on time, and how as a parent, and I'm, guilty of this as well. Oftentimes, like, we're not setting ourselves up for success, right? What does that 10-minute snooze look like as opposed to getting out the door with more ease and less of those power struggles? And so when I think of my own son's, tardiness or absenteeism, so much of that plays into how are we equipping ourselves to be able to help them to get out the door, as oftentimes if we're in that rushed moment, taking a breath and just pausing and what do we need to get out the door? Mm-hmm. And it sets a different tone for the day, right? As opposed to coming into the classroom and now, they're dysregulated, they're hungry or they're tired or, they didn't have a good bedtime routine, and it all just kind of goes on. Right?
Well, you mentioned the word rewards, and I think when I think about that, I think the ultimate reward and a goal for us is to develop that sense of belonging for children and youth, that they feel that they belong, that this is their space.
Absolutely.
And when that happens, I think that their voice belongs and they're able to speak up. Mm-hmm. And the parents feel comfortable coming and getting the services that they need. So creating that sense of belonging, in my mind, is the ultimate goal for us. Because if we're able to do that, then children are going to want to come to school more often. Yeah. They're going to want to be there to be in that space that represents them and where they can bring their whole selves to that space. And so that, to me, is the ultimate goal, and it will facilitate our ability to support them, to listen to them, to intervene if necessary, to keep them safe, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to help them thrive.
Mm-hmm. That old quote, "It takes a village," still holds true.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ferris, and appreciate all you do every day. And what a great discussion we just had today. And I can't wait to replay this one over and over again. This was a good one.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you all for watching this particular segment. We are on to some more community leaders. Of course, this being April, which is Child Abuse Prevention Month, we're going to continue this. But, we're going to be watching this past April. We're going to be watching this throughout the year and probably for several years to come. All this information, to me, is like, there's no limit on time as to how effective these conversations are going to be. So let's go on to the next speaker. We are back once again. Robert Aldana with you, along with my co-host of the program, Stephanie Barron Lu. And today we have, right now, Nora Llerena with Raíces y Cariño Family Resource Collective, also known as RC Fam. We've talked about how we need a village. Nora, I want you to tell us a little bit about your organization and what you have created.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. RC Fam, Raíces y Cariño, is a hub. And another word for hub, of course, is a village. When I was introduced to motherhood, I realized, that's what they meant by we need a village. So I made one. Took me about 10 years of brain power, but together with my husband and his parents, We created it. We also created it along with community partners like Positive Discipline and mentors and many of the hosts that you've had over this last month. We have enrichment classes for the whole family, not just children. We have support groups for dads, for mothers, for our LGBT community. The idea being that we need more opportunities to connect, which is exactly what we keep talking about, what you guys have all been talking about all month. We need opportunities to connect and to learn and to feel like we have a safe space to ask these hard questions.
So what have you found, as I know you have just, in your vast expertise as, part of maternal mental health groups and beyond, so how do families get out of isolation? If you are not an extrovert and you don't have that village, you don't count with that familial support, what do you recommend to families?
So they told us that we need a village, right? They told us this in the 90s.
Sure.
But not everybody has access to one. So one way that we can really create that is, one, of course, we got Zoom. We can find these support groups literally all over the country, all over the world that are super unique and pertinent to us. What I have shared with all of my families that I've worked with is creating a phone tree. And the idea of the phone tree is this person on the other end knows that when you call them, they need to pick up and be ready to listen. And so that means like you call person number one and you vent, you brainstorm, maybe you ask for some advice. More often it's honestly just venting in that moment. If they don't pick up, you move on to the next person and so on, just to get it out so we can be fully present. It also serves as that pause that we keep talking a lot about, that I've heard you guys talking about too, is take a minute to reassess before we react. That way we can respond.
They talk about, there's a saying that says it takes a village. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit different than this. It's the same, but it's a little bit different. When one says it takes a village, because we all know it takes a village to accomplish things, but we need a village to take us there. And that's what, does that make sense? In other words, we need the people. Where are the people? You're bringing the people.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
And coming to, again, really going into that nitty gritty, you've messed up. You've hit your child. You've yelled again. You've smashed a plate. Whatever that violence, whether it's mild, mediate, severe, right? It's happened. It's, what is it that when we're out of sync with our values, what do your support groups or what tools or advice can you give to families?
So what we really need as parents is, again, that safe space to say what happened, to say that I need help in this moment. So being able to say that out loud, and not be judged for it, not feel that shame from it. And that's in that phone tree, right? One, unique kind of newish way of getting that support in a moment of crisis is actually the 988 suicide prevention hotline. They're literally there 24 hours a day, and their job is to answer the phone. So always know, like, having the right support in the moment that you need it is child abuse prevention in itself.
And so now let's fast forward to other prevention type conversations, right?
Sure.
We've heard about stranger danger. We talk to our kids about don't get in the van, even if they offer you the chocolate, even if they, even if it's a Reese's cup, whatever that is, right? What is your advice around that? As I know that, moving forward into not just stranger danger as this like big thing, but also just the facts say it's oftentimes the people closest to us that have the greatest potential for harming our children.
Exactly. And so what I often use is tricky people. And of course we can use any term that like resonates with our family and our child understands, but tricky people as opposed to stranger danger. And the reason here is to really teach our children what a safe person looks like, what they sound like, and what they act like. And then the other piece is teaching what an instinct is with our children, like that feeling that you get, like when you're around a certain person that you feel really happy and safe with, as opposed to feeling uncomfortable or nervous or just uneasy. That's your instinct. Trust that and tell me about it. Tell me about when you feel that icky feeling maybe around somebody. Listen to that. Tell me about it.
Versus a child who says, I don't feel comfortable around that person, and the parent saying, stop being silly.
Right,
take it
right.
seriously. Like,
They're
take
our
that
neighbor.
conversation.
You've known them your whole life. Of course it's okay. Instead, it's like going back to let's trust our child and what they're telling us. And also, like, it's so incredibly empowering for our children to be able to one, strengthen this muscle of this instinct. We're going to use that the rest of our lives, right? But then also saying, like, oh, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel something, I'm a safe person as your mom, as your dad, or, you know, whoever it is. Like, you can tell me about that. I am going to listen, and I'm going to protect you. I'm going to advocate for you.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to make you hug that person. I'm not going to let you be alone with this person. You're good. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I think especially as, you know, like we said before, it isn't to demonize or jump to conclusions or feel like you have to be on pins and needles all the time. Sometimes kids are slow to warm up, right?
For sure.
They don't always want the hug, and that's okay. I think such a good muscle that you're mentioning to build is that I'm able to trust that feeling, and I don't have to be out of my comfort zone for the sake of people pleasing, right? That takes a lifetime to unlearn, speaking as a people pleaser.
Agreed.
Right.
I love that because we've talked about this in a previous episode, and that is how, you know, everybody has their different love language. Everybody reacts differently, you know, and there's no right or wrong. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I tell my kids that too, because when, you know, we've had conversations about, you know, people they meet, and I'm like, there's no right or wrong. Just talk to us. Tell me, you know, what's going on. And you don't have to feel comfortable around someone that you're not comfortable around. Makes sense?
And be curious. You know, sometimes it is about non-negotiables, right? In my household, we value helping people feel respected, helping people feel welcome in our home. That doesn't mean that you have to be everybody's best friend, but you can say, hi, good afternoon,
Absolutely.
and mom, can I be excused? Right? It's once again, it's setting that up in advance and talking about it out loud. One more thing I'd love to make sure to ask you about, Nora. You know, we mentioned around the lines of, you know, best practices and moving from stranger danger to tricky people. Another taboo subject is oftentimes about body curiosity. I have a third grader son, and I have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and, you know, babies want to touch themselves, you know, hands are in the diaper, you can be curious. And, you know, where is the line between normal curiosity and something to be really aware of as a potential red flag for, you know, child abuse, child sexual abuse, you know, those kind of things?
Yeah, this is one of those super uncomfortable conversations that parents find themselves in. Of one, it's uncomfortable because many of us weren't spoken to about it. And two, it's, you know, any conversation or interaction we had with our caregivers as children, many of us anyway, and then ourselves and exploring our bodies as whatever age, it's often coincided with shame. And then we feel real uncomfortable talking about it with our caregiver. So what I have written down here is that children being curious about their bodies is developmentally appropriate, actually. And so what we're really trying to teach parents is to not overreact when their young child is exploring their own body. This includes having or utilizing the correct terminology for body parts. That's for body awareness. That's for the comfortability in these conversations. And it's for in case there was something harmful that happened to our child, they would be able to explain exactly what happened and where that happened. So an arm is an arm, a penis is a penis. These are just body parts, and that's all they are. I will say, though, that we do feel there is a reason to be concerned if we have body exploration and any invasive behaviors with children who have a large age gap between them, especially if it's used with aggression. And this is when we want to make sure our children know to tell us promptly if something like this occurs. Again, going back to the ongoing conversations. And what I got from what you said is you're always telling this to your kids. You're always having conversations. Absolutely. Stephanie, you're always having these consistent conversations with your children. It's not a one big conversation. It's ongoing openness with our kids.
A constant conversation, you know, for us is more, hey, if you're uncomfortable with something, let us know. If you meet somebody that makes you uncomfortable, let us know. And I also tell my kids, don't feel embarrassed to tell us. If there's somebody that you don't feel comfortable around, it's not wrong or it's not right. You just don't feel comfortable. And you don't have to be in that atmosphere if it doesn't make you feel comfortable. And that's what we should let kids know, because
100%.
a lot of times kids feel guilty. The kids will feel guilty. They're like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to embarrass anybody. No, you should say something. If there's something that's bothering you, you should be able to have that conversation with your parents.
Exactly. That's the instinct that we're building. And we want them to have a really strong sense of self, a sense of that instinct, and sense of when they are feeling uncomfortable, and knowing and trusting that instinct to be able to say no, that they do have that power to say no. They're going to need that in childhood. They're going to need that in adolescence, adulthood. It is one of the strongest tools we can teach our children.
And knowledge is power. So let's empower our children, empower our youth, and empower ourselves, right? Sometimes one of the things is keeping secrets, right? And understanding especially for young children, the difference between a secret and a surprise, right? A surprise is more of like, oh, it's Mother's Day coming up, like, here's what we're going to surprise. Don't tell mom we bought this cake. That's very different than, if you say this, you'll get in trouble, right? Don't tell your dad.
Right. A safe person is probably not going to tell us to keep a secret from our mom or dad, but maybe a tricky person would.
You know what? That's a great point. That's an excellent point. Absolutely.
Secrets versus surprises.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. I love all of these tools. And again, it's just so important that we're opening the doors. And as you've both mentioned, taking away the taboo first means being okay with it ourselves.
Yeah.
If we can't quite say the word penis, or we can't quite, say the word, there's tricky people that might want to hurt you because we're afraid of bursting the bubble of security for our child, then we're disempowering them. We're putting them in vulnerable situations. Because if they're not getting the information from us, they're getting it from a cousin, from a friend, a neighbor, a friend at school, right? And so, I hope that through these episodes and through, these really great conversation starters, we can go and dive into our own research. There's so many great Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts, Conscious Parents, TEDx talks, right? So please, go out there, do some more, research into the pieces that really resonated for you. And, we're all just doing the best we can, and parenting is hard work. And as you said, Robert, we're not built in with a manual. We just know what was modeled to us. And either you're modeling that and you're just doing copy paste and it's not for the better, or we can take the strengths and take the gifts and leave the baggage behind.
You know what? That reminds me to make sure we have more spaces to do that together in. Social media has become a really great village addition. And then if you are really yearning for that village, you haven't been able to find it, I implore you to just search for one in your community. Sure. And if you can find one, build it.
That is Nora Llerena with Raíces y Cariño Family Resource Collective, again, also known as RC Fam. Appreciate all the info and all the tidbits, advice, and information you shared with us here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I want to thank you, Stephanie Barron Lu, for always, again, bringing these people together here. And it's been quite the experience, again, being able to talk to everybody and sharing these resources. And all of you who are watching this program, I'm going to ask you to please share these videos. And I'll tell you what else we're going to do. And I didn't tell you this, but what we're going to do is we're going to also break them up into little segments of each organization. So if there's a particular topic that people want more information on, people are going to be able to pull that from the library.
Oh, yes. That'll be so great.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you to just really the heart and passion that you have for bringing community together and just being really creative with your own skills and tools to, pull this off. And so I love dreaming this up with you and with all of our partners. And, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
And I learned something today. I learned so many things just from the various different people, but I learned the difference of it takes a village versus we need a village. Because we all know what it takes, but we need to put the people together to help with the resources. So thank you both so much. Thank you all for watching. Once again, feel free to share these videos. And we're going to break these up into lots of little segments so you can watch each particular topic. And I want to remind everybody again that April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. Let's make Child Abuse Awareness Month a monthly thing. It doesn't need to be just in April. Let's talk about it. Let's share resources, and let's always be aware that there are people like these two individuals here, always here to step up and help out the cause. Thank you all for watching. Looking forward to chatting with you soon. Bye-bye.